Photo Brett Coomer, staff Bill Bluthman, a NASA robotics engineer at Johnson Space Center, talks about the Resource Prospector rover, designed to drill into the moon's crust in search of water. Bill Bluthman, a NASA robotics engineer at Johnson Space Center, talks about the Resource Prospector rover, designed to drill into the moon's crust in search of water. Photo Brett Coomer, staff The Resource Prospector rover is equipped with binocular stereo vision and LED lights above. Using mapping technology, the rover will determine the areas of the moon most saturated with hydrogen and will drill in those areas for water. The mission, slated for 2022 or 2023, could have significant ramifications for deep space travel to Mars. The Resource Prospector rover is equipped with binocular stereo vision and LED lights above. Using mapping technology, the rover will determine the areas of the moon most saturated with hydrogen and will. More Photo Brett Coomer, staff The Resource Prospector rover is equipped with binocular stereo vision and LED lights above. Using mapping technology, the rover will determine the areas of the moon most saturated with hydrogen and will drill in those areas for water. The mission, slated for 2022 or 2023, could have significant ramifications for deep space travel to Mars. The Resource Prospector rover is equipped with binocular stereo vision and LED lights above. Using mapping technology, the rover will determine the areas of the moon most saturated with hydrogen and will. More Photo Brett Coomer, staff Even as President Donald Trump signed a directive last Monday to put boots back on the moon, a team of NASA researchers continued work on a quiet project to send an unmanned rover in there. The project started 3 years ago, when several NASA centers, including Johnson Space Center, embarked on a quest to learn more about availability of water on the moon. If there is enough water that can be collected easily, the elements could be broken down to create rocket fuel, for example, or astronaut life support. The result of their efforts, thus far, is Resource Prospector, a 6-square-foot rover outfitted with a drilling mini-science lab built to find and process water on the moon. "Our mission is about taking the next step toward chasing the water on the moon," said Bill Bluthman, the rover's element, led at Johnson Space Center. Touting his new directive last week, Trump said, "This time we will not only plant our flag and leave our footprint, we will establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars and perhaps someday to many worlds beyond." Launch of the rover still is about 5 years away, but Bluthman said that if the recent federal excitement helps get the rover into flight, we'll be very excited. A lunar discovery in November 2009, NASA officials made an announcement that fundamentally changed how people viewed the moon. Water existed in a permanently shadowed lunar crater. Many in the scientific community assumed the moon was a dry, desolate place. But data from NASA's lunar crater observation and sensing satellite indicated otherwise. Up until that point, everyone was certain the moon was absolutely dry, and this flipped that on its head, said Dan Andrews, project manager for rover at NASA's Ames Research Center in California. "This discovery really was a game-changer for how we thought of the moon. Scientists began chasing this new discovery in earnest. About 5 years later, NASA researchers began developing a rover that could find and capture this water. Their budget is $250 million, a small-scale project," Bluthman said. Fast forward to 2017 and the rover still is in the technology development phase. But researchers have a sense of how it will work. Using mapping technology, the rover will determine the areas of the moon saturated with the most hydrogen. It is those areas where the rover will drill for water in 4-inch chunks, Bluthman said, going down as far as a meter. Soil samples will be brought inside the rover any time water, typically in the form of ice, is detected, he said, and machinery that will test the soil. Astronauts blast off to space station. A capsule carrying 3 astronauts from Russia, Japan and the United States blasted off for a 12-day trip to the International Space Station. The Soyuz capsule with Anton Shkaplerov, Nora Shige-Kanai and Scott Tingle launched at 1:23 p.m. Sunday from Russia's manned space launch complex in Baikonur, Kazakhstan. The capsule is to dock Tuesday with the orbiting space laboratory. The 3 will join Russia's Alexander Misurkin and Joe Akaba and Mark Vande Hey of NASA. Meanwhile at the space station, a recycled SpaceX capsule has returned just in time for Christmas. NASA astronauts used the space station's big robot arm to grab the Dragon capsule out of orbit Sunday. It's the second visit for this particular supply ship, which made a delivery for NASA back in 2015, and only the second time a Dragon has had a repeat performance 250 miles up. SpaceX launched the Dragon from Cape Canaveral on Friday, using a previously flown Falcon rocket. It was the first time SpaceX had flown a recycled rocket with a recycled capsule on top, at the heart of the company's effort to drive down launch costs. The Dragon holds nearly 5,000 pounds of station goods. As for Christmas presents, NASA isn't saying, in true Santa style. But NASA did share that it electronically sent up a copy of the newly released Star Wars The Last Jedi on Friday, as a special holiday treat for the astronauts. Associated Press: the soil will be weighed and heated, he added, and anything that comes off the sample will be captured. Scientists want to understand whether the water is on the surface so we get to it, whether we have to excavate to get it, whether it's distributed as nice bricks or channels, Bluthman said. The discoveries made during this mission, slated for 2022 or 2023, could have serious ramifications for deep space travel, he said. If enough water is found, the hydrogen could be used to refuel rockets on the way to Mars, for example, and the oxygen could be used to refuel life support for astronauts, he added. This would not only make deep space travel easier, it would make it cheaper. Launching 1 pound of any material into space costs thousands of dollars, NASA's website states. 1 gallon of water weighs more than 8 pounds, so the ability to generate water, air and fuel in space could represent enormous cost savings for future deep space missions. The possibilities, Andrews said, have gained the attention of many commercial manufacturers. Really, I think the commercial world is hinging on what Resource Prospector finds about the nature of lunar resources, Andrews said. If they are accessible and if clever folks can come up with methods to extract them that are financially viable, that could be a new market. The rover is being built to last a lunar day, about 2 weeks on Earth. It will stay on the Moon, along with its samples, when the mission is complete, Bluthman said. Mars and beyond: Johnson's Moon rover could gain traction under the Trump administration, which has expressed a renewed interest in human lunar exploration. That interest was cemented December 11 when Trump signed Space Policy Directive 1, urging NASA to return Americans to the Moon. To read this article in one of Houston's most spoken languages, click on the button below. The directive marks an important step in returning American astronauts to the Moon for the first time since 1972 for long-term exploration and use, Trump said. The Trump administration has been working its way up to this announcement all year. Vice President Mike Pence voiced an interest in returning to the Moon in October during the National Space Council, according to the New York Times. The council, created to coordinate policies between NASA and other agencies involved in space, was dissolved in 1993. But Trump this past summer re-established it through executive order. We will return American astronauts to the Moon, not only to leave behind footprints and flags, but to build the foundation we need to send Americans to Mars and beyond, Pence said, according to the Times. On the day of Trump's December announcement, officials with Johnson Space Center said it was too early to understand how implementation of the new directive may affect our work. The center will undoubtedly be impacted. Johnson is where astronauts live and train before embarking on any space missions. The move to return to lunar exploration comes after the Obama administration spent 8 years pushing Mars travel over the Moon. It's not clear how or when a lunar exploration endeavor will be executed by the current administration. Funding for the directive was not addressed during the December 11 presidential announcement. Though Andrews, the lunar rover project manager, did not directly comment on the Trump administration's renewed interest in the Moon, he said NASA's focus on both lunar and deep space missions will be helpful to their mission. I don't even think you have to be interested in the Moon to see the value of Resource Prospector, he said. Its findings could enable so many other destinations as well.